Lin Tian is reincarnated as a goblin, the weakest of all magical creatures. At first, he has to stay hidden and be careful. Later, he shows the true nature of a goblin. He is blessed with many children, and the more he has, the stronger he becomes, thanks to the blessings from the gods. The cave is shrouded in darkness, filled with the chilling echoes of terrifying screams as the goblins celebrate the death of their leader. Among them, a goblin with bloodshot red eyes goes mad, declaring himself the new leader. Another goblin, however, objects, claiming he deserves the position since he did the most work. Fueled by envy and rage, he lunges at his comrade, biting into his nose. Because, of course, nothing says I'm the leader like biting someone's nose off. Chaos erupts, and the cave fills with more violent screams as other goblins gather around, watching the fight with glee. They start placing bets on the outcome, as if this is their version of a weekend sporting event. This chaotic atmosphere is their favorite pastime, bringing them endless joy in their otherwise dreary goblin lives. Amidst the commotion, some goblins whisper about bringing out the human girl their old leader had hidden. They grumble that he hadn't even touched her yet, clearly disappointed in his lack of goblin efficiency. They plot to find and take her for themselves, though a few hesitate because she's protected by that weird goblin. Unlike the others, who wear basic rags, this goblin is draped in tattered clothes that cover almost his entire body. It's like he's trying to make a fashion statement in a cave, a goblin trendsetter, perhaps. His terrifying appearance and the aura he exudes, suspiciously human-like, set him apart. The goblins assume that with the leader dead, this strange goblin will keep the girl for himself, because why wouldn't he? After all, he's the only one with a sense of style around here. They decide to follow him and seize the girl when the time is right. Some of the more cunning goblins suggest waiting longer, as their strongest members have already gone ahead to find the girl. They plan to let the weird goblin fight these members, then swoop in to kill him and finally take the girl. It's a plan with all the brilliance of a goblin strategy, which is to say, it's full of holes. They don't realize the strange goblin can hear them plotting. Realizing the girl is in danger, the strange goblin rushes back to where she's held captive, easily outpacing the other goblins with his impressive speed. It's almost as if he's in a hurry to audition for the Goblin Olympics. Upon arrival, he is horrified, though not entirely surprised, to see the rebellious goblins preparing to violate the girl. She pleads for help, her eyes wide with fear, as if to say, "Not again, goblins." The weird goblin confronts them, demanding they release her, which might be the most heroic thing a goblin has ever done in their entire history. The lead goblin, naturally, refuses, feeling entitled to the girl now that the old leader is gone. He puffs out his chest, which, let's be honest, doesn't do much when you're only 3 feet tall. The weird goblin, however, is determined to protect her. The lead goblin and his henchmen attack, aiming to kill him, because that's what goblins do best, solve problems with violence. Outnumbered, the weird goblin fights back fiercely, using every trick he knows. Considering his human background, that's quite a few. He doesn't believe these low-level goblins can defeat him, and is resolved not to die in such a grimy, smelly place. Seizing an opportunity, he grabs a weapon and kills the biggest goblin, who immediately regrets getting involved in this mess. The others, seeing this, suddenly remember they have somewhere else to be and flee the scene, not forgetting to shout threats about returning with reinforcements, because goblins do love their dramatic exits. Even after they leave, the weird goblin remains on guard, aware that this is just the beginning of more challenging days. The girl, whose name is Kelia, thanks him for saving her, noting how different he is from the other goblins. She's noticed, for instance, that he hasn't tried to bite her face off, which is a big plus in her book. She hopes he won't die because finding a goblin who isn't trying to kill you is rare, and she'd rather keep him around. The deeper reason for the weird goblin's actions is that he's actually a human named Lamin. A few days prior, Lamin had died in a tragic accident, which, let's be honest, is never a good day. Instead of meeting a divine entity, he finds himself transported to another world with a system, though not a very cooperative one. His system isn't fully activated, and apart from showing some stats, it doesn't do much else, like a broken video game. Kelia, who seems to know everything about this world, explains the significance of those stats in this world ruled by gods and inhabited by powerful monsters. Here, humans demonstrate their dominance through sheer power, which of course, Lamine doesn't have. Unfortunately, he's been reborn as the weakest and dirtiest creature, a goblin with laughably low stats. His current level is 5, with an HP of 20, strength of 5, and defense of 5, totaling an overall strength of 30. His stats are so low that even the weakest monsters would feel sorry for him. Fortunately, his name remains unchanged, Lamine. There's a way to become stronger, though it goes against his morals. Goblins, being the classy creatures they are, can increase their power through constant mating, but since goblins don't have females, they resort to kidnapping women of other species. Lamine, being a former human, finds this practice beyond disgusting but realizes he needs to become stronger to survive. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place, or in this case, a rock and a goblin. Kelia, seeing his worry, reassures him not to overthink it. She understands he's different from other goblins and doesn't want to be associated with them. With a hopeful smile, she promises that when the knights arrive to rescue her, she'll vouch for him. The knights, being fair and just, might let him live in her village, which sounds better than living in a cave full of goblins. This gives Lamine hope, though he's still concerned about how he'll explain his new look. Things take a turn when they hear a scream signaling the goblin's return. Without hesitation, Lamine orders Kelia to hide, which she does immediately because hiding from goblins is something she's become quite good at. The first goblin to appear charges at him, shouting that humans have arrived and it wants to mate with the girl to grow stronger, which Lamine finds both disturbing and oddly desperate. In its haste, the goblin makes itself an easy target, and Lamine swiftly kills it, feeling slightly sorry for the poor thing's lack of strategy. He informs Kelia that humans are there to save her. Overjoyed, Kelia assumes it's a knight and wants to check, but Lamine watches with concern as the knight, named Law, easily dispatches the goblins, expressing his disgust for them in a way that suggests he's had a bad day. Law, level 25, with strength 30 and defense 50, wears platinum armor and wields an iron sword, giving him a total power of 400. This makes Lamine feel like a rusty nail in comparison. Kelia approaches Law, calling out to him in excitement. Lamine, noticing Law raising his sword, acts quickly, pushing her out of the way just in time. Despite saving her, Lamine is bewildered by Law's attack, wondering if this knight missed the memo about saving damsels in distress, not decapitating them. Law angrily denounces the idea of a goblin being near a human and assumes Kelia has been defiled, jumping to the worst conclusion, because that's what knights seem to do these days. Kelia tries to explain she hasn't been defiled, pointing to Lamine as her protector. Law, however, doesn't believe her, dismissing the idea that a goblin could save anyone, let alone be anything but a pest. As Law raises his sword to kill Kelia, Lamine can't stand by and watch. With no other choice, he steps forward, pushing Kelia aside and confronting Law, hoping to buy her enough time to escape. Lamine grabs his crude weapon and lunges at Law, because really, what's one more fight in this crazy day? Just before they collide, an aura envelops Lamine, leaving both him and Law astonished. The aura comes from a woman dressed in white, radiating holiness and an air of someone who doesn't take nonsense. She orders Law to stop, sensing something strange about Lamine. This woman is Ephra, the saint, and she's here to ruin everyone's day in a holy sort of way. Kelia, seizing the moment, begs Ephra to save them. Ephra helps Kelia to her feet and presents her to Law, who had tried to kill them moments before. Then, Ephra turns her attention to Lamine and asks if he can understand her. Lamine, trapped within the barrier, recognizes Ephra as the saint and spokesperson for the divine temple, his potential savior. He quickly responds that he can understand her, explaining that he's a former human transformed due to an accident. He pleads with Ephra to take him along, promising to explain everything, though he suspects his explanation might not go over well. Lo dismisses Lamine as just a smarter-than-average goblin, but Ephra smiles, amused by the situation. She acknowledges that goblins are typically stupid and lowly creatures, which doesn't do much for Lamine's self-esteem. Ephra then asks Kalia to confirm if Lamine protected her, and Kalia joyfully confirms that he did, noting that he provided her with food and didn't try to eat her, which, in goblin terms, makes him practically a saint. Pleased, Ephra decides to take Lamine back to the temple for further study, because who wouldn't want a goblin pet? Lamine eagerly agrees, thinking things might finally be looking up. However, as they prepare to leave, Lamine notices a cruel smile on Ephra's face. Suddenly, he hears the sound of metal piercing flesh. In horror, he turns to find Kalia's lifeless body on the ground. Stunned, he realizes the truth. He's been played like a fiddle in the devil's orchestra. Ephra mocks his naivety, telling him that following her willingly was the best way to repay her. Lamine, filled with rage, accuses her of tricking him and killing Kalia, questioning the temple's supposed justice. Ephra, unimpressed, silences him with a sharp thrust of her staff, reminding him that he's nothing but a weak, filthy goblin. She declares that goblins are insects, and it's an honor that she even spoke to him. Lamine, now helpless, endures endless torture. Even in his unconscious state, he's awakened to more torment, wondering if he'll die there, regretting his foolishness and the trust he placed in humans. His suffering finally ends when he's tortured to death by the cruel woman. In his final moments, he wishes that if he had another chance, he'd never trust humans again. He dreams of revenge, but that seems impossible until he wakes up in a different space, filled with white light. A system window appears, informing him that the goblin-like simulation system has been activated. It asks if he wants to start again. Lamine, startled but eager for revenge, chooses to be reborn. This time, he's ready for anything, even if it means living his life as a Goblin 2.0. As the white light envelops him, Lamine smiles, ready for round 2. He has one chance, and he's not wasting it. The system warns him of impending danger, but Lamine isn't afraid. He's been given a second chance, and this time, he plans to use it wisely. He begins a simulation, thinking carefully about his choices. Despite the challenges ahead, Lamine is determined to survive and get his revenge. As he prepares to escape the goblin cave, he knows one thing for sure. This time, things will be different. This time, the goblins and humans alike will learn not to underestimate him. One of the guards enters the cave, hiding a knife behind his back, trying his best to sound reassuring as he tells the supposed girl that he's from the temple and there to take everyone home. The guard, who clearly thinks he's the hero of the day, is in for a surprise. Instead of a frightened woman, he finds Lamine, a goblin, holding a sharp knife and looking anything but welcoming. The other guard, noticing his comrade's hesitation, decides to check on him. The moment he spots Lamine, he looks as if he's just seen his worst nightmare, because, well, he has. In a flash, Lamine tosses the first mite's body aside and charges at the second guard with incredible speed. Lamine's agility allows him to easily wound the guard, who collapses to the ground, pain and fear written all over his face. Overcome with terror, the guard begins pleading for his life, babbling about his family, trying to show Lamine a picture as if that would help. He praises Lamine's intelligence, saying he was just following orders and wasn't really into this whole goblin-killing thing, but Lamine isn't buying it. The guard even goes as far as offering Lamine a bag of gold and the most beautiful woman he can find, clearly mistaking Lamine for someone who cares about gold, or women, for that matter. But Lamine's patience is running thin, and he's not one to fall for such tricks. For someone like Lamine, who's been betrayed by the so-called good guys, these pleas only fuel his anger. The guard's true intentions are painfully obvious. He's hoping Lamine will hesitate long enough for him to find a way out. But Lamine, already familiar with human deception, swiftly and coldly ends the guard's life. There's a brief moment where Lamine feels a twinge of pity for the guard's family. But he knows that in this world, mercy can be as dangerous as any sword. As Lamine catches his breath, his attention is drawn to voices in the distance. It's Law and his men, getting closer. With no time to waste, Lamine quickly strips the guard's clothes and flees, promising himself that one day he'll make Law and Ephra pay for what they've done. Meanwhile, Law and Ephra arrive at the scene and are greeted by the sight of two very dead temple knights. Law, always the optimist, immediately suspects a goblin ambush, noting the clean, swift cuts that are far too precise for your average goblin. Ephra, ever the mad scientist, is practically giddy with excitement. She licks her lips in anticipation, already imagining what experiments she'll conduct on this mysterious goblin. As night falls, casting eerie shadows over the forest, Lamine finds himself panting heavily. He's alive, but only just. He's been running non-stop, but he knows he can't let his guard down. After all, humans have shown him time and again that they hate goblins with a passion that borders on obsessiveness. As Lamine tries to catch his breath, he thinks to himself that if humans hate goblins so much, he might as well start using goblin tactics against them. After all, goblins have their own way of getting stronger, though it's a method Lamine finds both disgusting and disturbingly efficient. With hatred simmering in his heart, Lamine vows that he'll make all men experience the happiness of death, and all women kneel at his feet in fear, especially Law and Ephra. Just as Lamine is working up a good bit of dark determination, his thoughts are interrupted by the rustling of leaves. Worried that Law's henchmen might still be on his trail, Lamine decides to strike first. He charges at the source of the noise, only to stop short when he realizes his opponent is another goblin. This isn't just any goblin, though. This one has distinctly female characteristics. For a moment, Lamine is too stunned to speak. Goblins are supposed to be all male, so what's she doing here? The female goblin, who looks just as shocked as Lamine feels, quickly drops to the ground, begging him not to hurt her. She stammers something about just fetching water, her wide eyes full of fear. Lamine, curious and a bit bewildered, checks her attributes using his assessment skill. To his surprise, she's only level 3 with an overall strength of 10. But what really catches his attention is a special note indicating that if a male and female goblin combine, they could become the legendary goblin god. Seeing the dark thoughts in Lamine's eyes, the female goblin backs away, clearly worried about what's going through his mind. She explains that she was caught by the patriarchs to fetch water, and that if she doesn't return soon, she'll be beaten to death. Lamine, realizing he's probably scaring the poor girl half to death, apologizes and tries to comfort her, though his idea of comfort is a bit awkward. He pats her shoulder, telling her not to cry because it would attract bad people, which in goblin terms is probably sound advice. The female goblin, still a bit shaky, is more interested in how Lamine can speak like her. Her eyes light up with excitement, and she clings to his cloak, remarking that he's much nicer than the other goblins who just beat her up all the time. She suggests that Lamine come back to her tribe with her, revealing the existence of a nearby goblin camp. Lamine's eyes light up at the opportunity to recruit some followers, a first in goblin history. When they arrive at the goblin camp, the other goblins eye Lamine warily. He looks and dresses too much like a human for their comfort. Lamine calmly explains that he wants to join them and meet their leader, But the goblins aren't exactly the welcoming committee. They decide to capture Lamine and drag him to see the patriarch. The female goblin steps in, trying to defend Lamine, but the commotion only attracts more attention. The patriarch, an old goblin with a staff decorated with skulls, approaches. He's clearly not your average goblin, with a level 25 priest profession and an intimidating set of skills. The patriarch asks the female goblin if she brought the stranger to the camp. When she nervously confirms, the patriarch praises her for doing a good job, then immediately orders the other goblins to capture Lamine. The goblins, excited at the prospect of a fresh meal, shove the girl aside and prepare to pounce. But Lamine isn't about to go down without a fight. He draws his weapon and orders the goblins to halt, claiming that he can forge weapons that will make their tribe stronger. The iron knife he holds catches the patriarch's attention. The leader, suspicious but curious, moves closer to Lamine, sniffing him like a dog trying to figure out if a bone is worth burying. Lamine, ever the salesman, explains that he can make weapons from iron if they can find ore. He promises that with time, he can produce weapons far more powerful than his knife. The patriarch, recognizing the potential, decides to give Lamine a chance. He demands that Lamine find iron ore and create weapons within 3 days or face death, along with the female goblin who brought him here. No pressure, right? The next morning, Lamine leads the goblins on a search for iron ore. By nightfall, Gobu, the female goblin, is exhausted. She's been beaten by her kin and threatened with death for failing to find ore. Lamine, disgusted by their treatment of her, throws a rock at one of the goblins to get their attention. He scolds them for fighting among themselves instead of focusing on the task at hand, threatening to kill anyone who doesn't cooperate. The goblins, now fearing Lamine more than they fear the patriarch, quickly get back to work. With the iron secured, Lamine turns his attention to becoming stronger. He notices a notification about mating with Gobu to become a goblin god, and after some awkward hesitation, decides to go for it. Seeing Gobu in distress, he tries to comfort her, proposing that they join forces to become stronger. Gobu, unsure but hopeful, agrees to help. Lamine, a bit embarrassed but determined, reassures her, and they proceed with the union. As a result, Lamine's level increases, and his physical attributes improve significantly. He's now stronger with defined muscles and enhanced stats. Feeling more confident, Lamine assures Gobu of his protection and affection, though he's still figuring out how to handle this whole goblin god thing. Just as they're starting to enjoy their newfound power, a goblin appears, fleeing from a large wolf while carrying iron ore. Lamine, always ready for a fight, charges at the wolf with his knife, swiftly killing it with a single blow. The goblin, terrified by Lamine's prowess, hands over the iron ore without a second thought. Holding the high-quality ore, Lamine knows that with more of this, he can fulfill his promise and create powerful weapons for the tribe.